Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we are diving into a really big one, deconstruction. It's a word you've probably heard thrown around, maybe in a university class or in some dense article. But what does it actually mean? Let's unpack it.
Okay, let's kick things off with this super famous and maybe famously confusing quote. It comes from the philosopher Jacques Derrida, and it goes, "Il n'y a pas de hors texte." Now that translates to, there is no outside of the text. I know, that probably sounds a little out there, but trust me. By the end of this, that phrase is not only going to make sense, it's going to unlock the whole idea.
So, to get that quote, we have to meet the man himself, Jacques Derrida. He was a French philosopher who basically walked onto the scene in the mid-20th century and just challenged the very foundations of Western thought. His whole project really forces you to question everything you assume about how language and reality even work.
His ideas really just exploded onto the world stage in the late 1960s. After this one huge seminar in the US, he published a series of absolutely groundbreaking books. I mean, they were not easy reads, but works like of grammatology and writing indifference just laid the foundation for everything we now call deconstruction.
Okay, so this is absolutely crucial. Deconstruction isn't a neat little theory with a checklist of rules you follow. Derrida himself was really clear about this. You should think of it more like a method, a way of approaching a text, and for him, almost anything could be a text, to see how this stable meaning you thought was there, well, how it starts to fall apart when you look closely. It's not a what, it's a how.
To actually use this method, Derrida first had to point out the prison. He basically argued that for centuries, all of Western philosophy has been stuck inside this invisible, intellectual cage that he called logocentrism. And his whole project was about showing us the bars.
So, what is logocentrism? Well, it's any system of thought that's built on a logos. And a logos is, think of it like the ultimate anchor. It's the final authority that guarantees meaning. For a long time, that was God. But it could also be a big concept like reason or truth with a capital T. It's that central, unquestionable point that holds everything else steady.
And this system works kind of like a chain of command. You've got the logos at the top, acting as the ultimate guarantor. It ensures that a specific word, what we call the signifier, is locked to a specific concept, the signified. And then that concept is locked to a real thing out there in the world. The logos keeps this whole chain from breaking.
Let's make this a little more concrete. Take a traditional Christian worldview. The word love, that's our signifier, is tied directly to the concept of self-sacrifice, the signified. And that concept is then tied to real-world things like marriage, church, and certain behaviors. So what holds it all together? The anchor, the logos, or the Word of God, which gives that specific meaning its final, unshakable authority.
And this is where Derrida makes his most radical move. He asks the question that just rattles 2,000 years of thinking: what happens to our whole system of meaning when you pull out that central anchor? What happens when the logos is gone? Because once that anchor is gone, the entire structure gets incredibly shaky. All those neat, tidy connections we had between our words, our concepts, and the world out there, they start to unravel, and language begins to act in really, really weird ways.
See, without a logos to stop the chain, meaning just becomes this endless game. The word love isn't fixed anymore. Now it could be defined by passion, which is defined by desire, which is defined by longing, and on and on and on, forever. You end up chasing a final meaning that you can never actually catch, because you're just bouncing from one word to the next.
Deconstruction also exposes these hidden power structures that are baked right into our language. Derrida noticed our thinking is built on these pairs of opposites, right? Like speech versus writing or soul versus body. But he said they're never equal. He called them violent hierarchies because one term is always secretly, systematically valued more than the other. And a deconstructive reading flips that hierarchy upside down to show how unstable it was in the first place.
All of this stuff, the logocentrism, the hierarchies, it all serves to protect this one core belief that Derrida call the metaphysics of presence. It's that gut feeling we have that meaning is just there, that it's stable, immediate, and fully present inside a word. Deconstruction's main job is to show you that this feeling is actually an illusion.
Here's a super simple way to think about it. Take a piece of chalk. Seems like it has a clear, self-contained meaning, right? But hold on. The meaning isn't in the chalk. A piece of chalk only makes sense because of a blackboard, which only makes sense because of a classroom, which is part of an educational system, which depends on politics and industry and so on. All of a sudden, the meaning of that simple piece of chalk is scattered across this huge external network of things that are not the chalk.
So, let's circle back to that quote from the beginning. There is no outside of the text. It should make a lot more sense now. Derrida isn't saying that only books exist. What he means is that there's no way to get to reality, or to history, or even to yourself without going through this massive, all-encompassing web of language and relationships, this text. We're always inside the network.
Now, as you can probably imagine, these ideas were and still are super controversial. I mean, for every person who hailed Derrida as a genius, there was someone else calling his work complicated, impenetrable jargon.
And critics have raised some really important points. Some argue deconstruction just flattens real historical differences into an abstract game of words. Others point out that one of Derrida's own key concepts, différance, kind of becomes its own unquestionable logos, the very thing he was trying to critique. And some historians say, hey, a lot of these core ideas aren't even that new. You can find similar thoughts all the way back with the ancient Greek sophists.
So why does any of this matter? What's the big takeaway here? Well, the real power of deconstruction is that it gives us a tool. It's a method for looking much more critically at any text, and that could be a novel, a legal document, a political speech, even our own beliefs, and revealing the hidden assumptions and biases that hold it all together.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty provocative thought. If Derrida is right, if there's no stable center, no ultimate anchor, and if meaning is always shifting, then what exactly is holding our shared world together? What creates our common sense of reality? And that's a question really worth thinking about.